Andrew was sitting on a park bench and eating takeout from the nearby deli. That park was his favorite place because he'd spent a lot of time there with his grandmother, Madeline. It was located near her apartment building, so she often took Andrew to play there. They would sit on the bench and feed the birds, listening to the noise of the trees. Even though he was a grown man now, Andrew furtively looked around, as if he was afraid that his grandmother would see him. Madeline was always against such snacks, and any kind of fast food or street food, for that matter. When Andrew was little, she never allowed him to eat any of it. But there was one place that Andrew couldn't refuse, because the food there was simply delicious. Therefore, when Andrew came to visit Madeline twice a week, he got something from that deli. The man was 30 years old. He had his own small but quite successful company and his own house. He had long wanted to move Madeline in with him, but she flat out refused to do it. So the man made sure to visit her regularly. Madeline was his only living relative. He often thought about how he'd like to stop time so that his grandmother could stay with him for as long as possible. Thanks to Andrew, Madeline survived the loss of her only daughter, her son-in-law, and her youngest grandson, Eric. It happened when Andrew was 12. Eric was 4 years younger. He was a very adventurous child who always got into trouble. One day, he ran away with some older friends to jump off the bridge into the river. Luckily, one of the fishermen noticed that the boy couldn't fight the current and saved him. Another day, he went out to explore the old abandoned hangar in the outskirts of the city, climbed on top of it, and fell into a hole. The search for the boy continued for over a day. Eric's latest adventure was jumping off a 2-story building. He made himself wings and thought that he'd be able to fly with them, but instead of flying, Eric fell down like a stone. The emergency service operator said that all ambulances were out on calls and they'd have to wait for at least a half hour. So the parents decided to take their son to the hospital on their own. They almost made it to the hospital when suddenly, a truck drove onto the oncoming lane. The driver was drunk and crashed head-on into Eric's car. Everyone died in the accident. 12-year-old Andrew was devastated by the loss of his entire family. Madeline had no choice but to pull herself together and help her only remaining grandson live through the grief. So many years had passed, but every time he came to the graves of his family, Andrew couldn't hold back his tears. Andrew's hand reached for the bag to get another serving of food when suddenly, a boy of about 7 years of age ran up to him from behind him, grabbed the bag, and ran away as fast as he could. Andrew wasn't even going to try to catch up with him. He didn't care about the food at all. I wonder how long this little thief had been watching me, Andrew thought, and headed down the alley towards Madeline's house. Madeline was very happy to see her grandson as always. Although Andrew wasn't hungry, the man couldn't say no to a cup of tea with a freshly baked apple pie. Andrew and Madeline's tea ceremony was interrupted by a knock on the door. "Are you expecting someone?" Andrew asked. "No, I have no idea who that could be," Madeline replied. "Hey, I'm Amber, your upstairs neighbor. I have a problem with the faucet in the bathroom. I can't turn the water off. If I don't do it now, I'll end up flooding the entire building," the woman said with tears in her eyes. "I'm certainly not a plumber, but let's see if I can help." Andrew rushed to the aid of the new neighbor. There was a fountain of water sprouting from the faucet. Andrew quickly went back to his grandmother's apartment and grabbed the toolbox that once belonged to his grandfather. The man managed to turn off the water in a matter of minutes, thus preventing the flooding. Then, Andrew went on to repair Amber's faucet. While the man was working, the woman told him that she'd only recently bought this apartment. She always dreamed of having her own place in the city, so she got a job immediately after graduating from school and started saving up for it. And on her last birthday, her parents gave her the amount she was short. The man really liked Amber, but didn't want to admit it to himself. It was Madeline who helped him realize that he really did like the young woman. When Andrew came to see his grandmother the next week, she casually asked if he had stopped by Amber's. "No, why would I?" Andrew answered, pretending not to understand what Madeline was hinting at all. "Well, maybe because last time you came down from her apartment all happy and excited, and ever after that she's been coming by to ask for salt and all kinds of things," Madeline said, smiling mysteriously. "You know what? Maybe I'll just go up and ask her out," Andrew said suddenly. "Are you serious?" "I won't believe it until I see it with my own eyes," the grandmother joked. Seeing Andrew, the woman's face lit up with joy, although she did try to hide it. "Andrew, I didn't expect to see you." As soon as she said that, the intercom started buzzing. Amber pressed the button to ask who it was. "Excuse me, could you give me some food?" a child's voice asked. Amber gave Andrew a confused look. "I'll go down and see who that is," Andrew said. Nate was shifting from foot to foot near the front door. The boy hadn't eaten anything since yesterday. He lived with his father, who did nothing but get drunk. He didn't have a job and had already sold everything that had any value in the house. There wasn't any food in their home for a very long time. The boy tried to earn some cash to be able to buy food, but that day, some older boys took all of the money he'd managed to earn. Despite the fact that the boy had to go hungry for several days before, he rarely dared to bluntly call up random people and ask them for food, only when he was desperate. The boy was often told to go to hell, but that day, Nate thought he got lucky when a pleasant female voice told him to wait there. "Oh, hello, old friend," Andrew exclaimed when he saw the boy. The kid was terrified. Of course, he recognized Andrew. He got a good look at him when he stalked him in the park last week before stealing his food. Nate wanted to run away, but Andrew managed to grab the boy by the arm. "Let's go," the man ordered. "Where?" Nate asked timidly, thinking he was about to be taken to the police station. "What do you mean, where? Didn't you ask for food?" Andrew's voice softened. Nate virtually grew up on the streets, so he was always cautious. But now his instincts told him that he wasn't in any danger. The boy followed Andrew quietly. Seeing the skinny, grimy boy with big blue eyes, Amber almost started crying. "Okay, I'll set the table and you go wash up in the meantime," the woman said and handed the boy a towel. Nate washed his hands and his face. The water was so warm and the soap smelled so good that the boy couldn't help himself and took a shower too. After a good wash, Nate felt so warm and comfortable that hunger faded into the background, and all the boy wanted to do was go to sleep. Nate ate his food greedily. "Aren't you afraid to get a stomachache?" Andrew asked with a smile. "I'm not. I'm used to eating a lot when I get the chance, because I never know when I'll be able to eat again." "Do you go to school?" Amber asked. "No, I was supposed to start this year, but my father said to stay home because we don't have any money." "I probably won't start it next year either." Having eaten his fill, Nate fell asleep right at the table. Andrew carried the boy to the couch and covered him with a blanket. "Let him stay with me for a few days. At least he won't have to starve here," Amber suggested. The young people spent the next couple of weeks taking care of Nate's situation. Meanwhile, the boy took turns living with Amber and Madeline. The elderly woman treated the child like her own grandson, taught him to read, and told him bedtime stories. At such moments, Nate imagined that he was living in a normal, happy family. As it turned out, the social services had already had enough on the boy's father to start the process of removing Nate from his house. Andrew and Amber expressed their desire to adopt Nate. "Given that you aren't married, only one of you can adopt the boy, so you have to decide," the social worker told them. The young people looked at each other for a moment. "You know what? I think that's a pretty good reason to ask you to marry me," Andrew said. "And I think it's a pretty good reason to say yes," Amber replied. 6 months later, Andrew and Amber officially adopted Nate. The boy no longer had to imagine what it would be like to have a real family, because now he had one, and a very happy one at that.